Happy Friday. Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks podcast. I'm Jay Zawaski without Greg Boyson or Mario Tirabassi. I had to pause myself because I've done it so many times out of habit. We're here with Joe Brand from WGN Radio and Charlie Roumeliotis from NBC Sports Chicago. Fellas, thanks for joining me today.
What's going on, man? It's an honor to be here.
Sure.
Jay, I just got back from Europe a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago, and when I went to Greece, everyone was like, "Where's Jay? Why didn't you bring him?" Well, that was the main question I got when I was there.
I assume so, and I haven't been back. I've never been to the homeland because I've only known it's been the homeland for like a couple of years when I did 23andMe and found out I'm 25% Greek. So I would love to go sometime. It looks absolutely beautiful. Your photos were stunning, but anytime I see a photo from Greece, I'm like, damn, that is breathtaking.
Joe, I missed you too there.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We're glad you guys could get that one out of the way. Similar story, though, Jay. I was just at Rosie's in Oak Lawn, and they were like, "Where is Jay? We're looking for Jay." And as always,
well, I might be there tonight
once again. But
yeah, I might be there tonight.
Thrilled to be here. Always thrilled to be here. Always fun to hop on. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you, fellas, for doing this on short notice. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take our best stab at the Blackhawks opening night lineup. And as I got a little preview of what you guys have, I was a little surprised by a couple things. So we'll definitely have some good conversation as we roll around here. Wow, I can talk. As we roll around here. Also, a little bit of news I want to get to before we get to the lines. Aesthetics, who is like the authority on hockey uniforms around the NHL, I guess has inside info that the Blackhawks Winter Classic jersey is going to be red. This is exciting news to me. I wrote about this when they announced the Winter Classic. I think my Blackhawks beat for that week was, please, for the love of God, make a red Winter Classic jersey. And you're welcome, everyone. It was me.
We're assuming that you had a hand in this.
Yeah. I think that's the only Winter Classic announced. I write column saying bring red jersey, cut to reported red jersey. There's no other conclusion to draw other than I influenced them completely.
No, and it's about time they started listening to you. I mean, hopefully everything that you have to say now will start be taken into effect. But
well,
I'm with you, Jay.
Back. Tavo's back too.
Right?
2 for 2, baby.
Hey, I do not envy the people that have to put together those jerseys because, especially if you're the Blackhawks, where you've already participated in 6 of them, the creativity that it takes to not try to replicate something that has already been done has definitely have to be a challenge. So I'm excited to see what these full jerseys look like when they drop.
The other hope I have, I know it's probably too late, but I wrote about this too. With the Hawks in red, the Blues should wear blue. It works for USC and UCLA when they play football. How cool would that be to have red and blue jerseys on the ice? That would be great. It would look so good at the Winter Classic where you're a little bit farther away from the ice. It would pop more. You'd be able to, oh man, that's the hope is it's red versus blue, but I'll just take the red jersey. I'm very happy with that.
Especially with the inverse Cubs-Cardinals rivalry, right? With each team having the different color. But yeah, like what you said, Charlie, I mean, especially with the Hawks being in so many outdoor games, it can be tough to just really think, too far outside the box. But yeah, no, I'm with you, Jay. A red outdoor sweater, I think, will be a breath of fresh air and something that fans will be really excited for.
Yeah. So if our friends at Aesthetics are seeing it, I'm sure that we will see it in the coming days or weeks or whatever it might be. People are asking in the chat. There's no photo to show yet. There's not even a concept out, but they basically said we're going to see it and it's red. So when they report it, it's pretty solid. And we got a $5 super chat here from our friend the Giggities, who says happy 18th birthday to our youngest prospect in the system and Jay's favorite player, John Mustard. I don't know if you guys know my my pre-draft thoughts on John Mustard. I just said the Hawks can't draft him because the name is so terrible.
And they took him?
Yes, and no one will ever say Hall of Famer John Mustard. It just doesn't sound right. And of course, they did it.
Well, first of all, what a name. The Jiggities is a sweet donation.
Yeah.
By the way, Jay, I wanted to say something. When you were talking about the Blues wearing blue and the Blackhawks wearing red, I might get some flack for this as I have, but I think you might be in my corner. This is actually part of the reason why I like home whites is because, or if I like when the visiting team comes to the home crowd, so like Chicago, and the Hawks can wear their white jerseys, but if the Leafs are in town, they wear their blue jerseys. If Nashville's in town, they wear yellow. And it also allows for a combination like that. If the Blues come to town, they wear their blue. The Hawks can wear their reds as well and kind of have that, like you see the colorful combination. So just kind of like a sidetrack of like the home whites. I know it's not popular in today's generation because they're so used to home reds, but I love the home whites because it allows you to see the different colors when the visiting team comes in.
I agree with you. I have been a home whites guy my whole life. It's never going to happen. I know that they sell more of the dark jerseys. I understand it, but I think part of it is that's what I grew up with was the white jerseys at home. And to see the white jerseys was kind of a special thing because home games weren't on TV. And I just think when you see them in person, the colors pop a little more on the white, especially I like the green that the Hawks use. They have it in the sleeves, like on the Tomahawks. I think it looks really good. And then the big black bold numbers and letters with the red outline. I think I like the white homes better or the white jerseys better, but it's never gonna happen. It's like I can't die on that hill, I know it will never come.
There's only so many jersey proclamations you can make in one lifetime, Jay.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like they've appeased one. So
I'll take my solitary win with the reported red Winter Classic jersey and run with that. And I got my Marian Hossa Stanley Cup 2013 jersey back there.
I will say quickly too, the Hawks do a really good job of.
Wow, real cliffhanger.
I was like,
you're leaving us hanging.
It was good timing at least. Yeah, and he didn't look weird in the photo. There we go. You're back.
Joe, you cut right when you said the Hawks do a really good job of, and we were waiting on that cliffhanger.
Fill in the blank. Yeah, no, sorry. It's honestly my internet connection, not sure what, but they do a really good job of distinguishing the numbers and the names on the back from the color of the jersey. I can't tell you how many teams just have the same type of color code on their numbers and on the jersey. It's so easy to identify players, and that is something that I think is overlooked a lot of times when people make new jerseys and make new numbers, and it's very beneficial for fans and broadcasters.
Well, and yeah, you get a lot of teams too, like messing around with different fonts and different outlines, and like Nashville, they still have this, but when they had the Navy jerseys, had like a little bit of a stripe in the letter. The one time I think that the Hawks kind of dropped the ball on that was the original Winter Classic jersey, because you had the cream middle and then the numbers were also cream. So you would, from a distance, you would lose the numbers a little bit, but every time since then, they've nailed it. They always do a good. I have very little concern that the Winter Classic jersey is going to be great, but the fact that it's red is just very, very exciting to me. But yeah, that's a good point. Like you don't want, especially like you said, Joe, for broadcast purposes, you want to be able to see who the hell the player is. It's helpful.
That does help a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to get to our lines here in a few minutes, but before we do, make sure everybody smashes that like button for us. I failed to do this earlier in the show. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube page as well. If you're listening on your favorite podcast app, we appreciate that too. Make sure you're following or subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you got some time this weekend, you got 30 seconds of kindness in your heart, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I should also say Monday, I believe I'm going to be solo. So it's going to be an Ask Jay Anything show. So I'll put out a tweet probably after this show and kind of grab the questions from there. And if you want to throw questions into the members only Discord as well, I can grab them from the little mailbag section there. So we're going to give that a shot. I haven't hosted a solo show in quite a long time, but the mailbags can make it go a little bit faster, a little bit easier. So that's the plan for now. Monday at 2:30, just me. Ask me anything. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be remote because the DNC is coming and the entire West Loop is completely shut down. So all of CHGO is going to be remote next week until Thursday. And then Friday, we've got the Kickoff Classic golf outing. If you'd like to go, there are literally single digit tickets remaining. So jump on that and do that.
Why
Joey,
don't you do
sorry.
really quick? Why don't you do your projected lineup for the second game of the season on Monday?
That's Wow, you know what? That would fill 82 shows. Now now you're on it. I should have asked you this months ago. Man, no, I'm excited. We're gonna do this one. Joey, can I hit the break early? Is that okay? Because I don't want to start this and have to take a break in the middle of it. I want to see if Joey.
We cannot hit the break early. We are on strict break times here.
Okay, so I got to wait 4 minutes. All right, let's get started then. Let's get started with the forward lines. Who wants to go first? Who wants to do the honors?
Joey,
all right, Charlie, you didn't raise your hand. You're going first.
Okay.
That's what you get, Charlie.
Okay, wait, time out. Am I running through all 4 lines, but I'm commenting on
but
each
yeah,
line,
let's start with line 1. We'll comment on it, and then we'll see what time, and we'll pick it up where we can pick it up.
All right, perfect. So first line, I have Tyler Bertuzzi, Connor Bedard, Philip Kurashev. I feel, guys, over time, Bedard and Kurashev are probably going to get separated just because there's so much more, I don't want to say firepower, but now with the addition of Tavo and Taylor Hall is back, it feels like Kurashev might get bumped onto a lower line, but I don't see why you want to go away from Bedard and Kurashev because they had such great chemistry all of last year. So I think you run it back, and then when that stops working, then you change out of it. So that's my my first line.
Okay. And Joe, if I'm not mistaken, not to spoil things, but I think you had the same first line, right?
Yes. For
all right, well,
very different reasons than Charlie, but no.
No,
Pretty much.
Let's discuss.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. Basically the same thing that Charlie had to say. I mean, if it's not broke, why try to fix it, at least from the get-go? And again, I mean, we're talking about opening day lineup, not home opener. I think that kind of gives the flexibility to see how things shake out in the first 4 games on the road. If maybe those two aren't clicking as they were a lot last year, maybe they do make the change and put Turbo up on that top line. But I think from the get-go at the beginning, you might as well see what you still have in Bedard and Kurashev. And also just kind of a half a reward for Kurashev and also half a somewhat of a challenge. Like, okay, here, you earned this from last year. Can you produce once again? Can you continue this high praise and this high slot on the top line because he made such strong strides last year? I think it's kind of a two-way reward, also challenge for him in the following year.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a lot of people, and I mean, it's certainly part of it. Like playing with Connor Bedard is going to help you statistically. There's no doubt about it. But I think some people are maybe a little quick to dismiss what Kurashev did as simply being the beneficiary of Bedard. They did have some really nice chemistry last year, and it would not shock me to see Kurashev start the season on that top line. They seem to like each other. They seem to have figured each other's rhythms out and those sort of things. And what I like about Kurashev really as a player, but especially on a line with Bedard, if that's what does happen, is he's got that willingness to kind of go into a corner and pull a puck out and distribute and take a hit, and it frees up space for him. And if you got another guy in the left wing and Bertuzzi kind of doing the same thing, you're going to open up a lot of space for Bedard. And I think that was part of the problem last year is, and as we're praising Philip Kurashev here correctly, at the same time, I don't think Kurashev is a guy who teams like worry about necessarily. But I think when you have him and Bertuzzi, then it's different, right? Like then you've got two guys that have proven that they can score in this league. They're dangerous in front of the net, especially Bertuzzi. I like that potential combination as a top line for sure. I think it could certainly work out, and there's no shame in seeing. Look, if Kurashev is capable of playing on the top line, that means you can bump Tavo down or whoever down, and it makes all 4 lines stronger as opposed to stacking the top line, which is something we saw with Joel Quenneville all the time. It was very rare that Taves and Kane were together. Usually had Taves one, Kane on the second line, or however you want to number it, doesn't really matter, to give that scoring depth. But then when an emergency happened and they needed a goal and it was late, then you put those two together and all bets are off. So, all right, there's the first line from Charlie and Joe. We're going to get to my first line here on the other side of the break. But you guys know, if you've been following me throughout my various podcasts and throughout the years, that I am a huge advocate for therapy. I actually just went yesterday, and I have to tell you, like, therapy is like one of the highlights of my week. It's just a day where I can just kind of dump my brain, whether I had a crazy stressful week or whether it was just kind of a everything was fine, but there's just some things I want to talk about. It's the greatest. To me, therapy and self-care is a non-negotiable. It's something I never miss. And when your schedule is packed with kids' activities and your job and everything that's going on, it's easy to sort of let that slip. I really want everyone to consider therapy. And I know it can be a little bit intimidating, and I know it's hard to maybe find that same hour of the day or of the week all the time. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. It's totally online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you could switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So, if for whatever reason you're not really clicking with your therapist, guess what? It's a lot easier on the BetterHelp app to just be like, new therapist, please, than to go into your appointment in the office and be like, hi, this isn't working for me. I am switching therapists. You don't have to worry about that stress with BetterHelp. So never skip therapy day. Visit BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/CHGO today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/CHGO. And when it's not therapy day, sometimes you need to reach for a little bit of help from a friend. And my friends are at Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. It is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. And look, just like starting therapy, starting your cannabis journey can be a little bit intimidating. You don't want to go in there and feel like a dork, like you don't really know what to buy. You're not sure what to do. You don't want to ask too many questions and come off as stupid or a noob or whatever you want to say. The people at Sunnyside will make it so easy for you to elevate your summer. And if you're a veteran, if you're someone who has been a connoisseur of cannabis since it's become legal, because you wouldn't have done it before then, right? Of course not. Your friends at Sunnyside will help you out there too, with over 100 strains to choose from, plus easy online ordering and in-store pickup. They've got locations in the city, in Wrigleyville and River North, and the Burbs, Champaign, South Beloit, among many others. And I want to recommend to you two of my favorite Sunnyside brands, Good News and Mindy's. Whether you're into edibles, whether you're into the disposable vape or flower, all those brands have you covered. And if you're looking for something else, again, 100 different strains available at Sunnyside. So visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including, listen to this deal, everybody, 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter the promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 plus or Illinois MedCard holders. All right, I'm going to now share my top line, a little bit different from you two. I had Connor Bedard with Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi, and maybe this is me just getting excited to have the new toys, right, and take them out of the box right away and play with them. It just, as we were sort of looking ahead to free agency, even midway through last season, and you saw Teuvo Teravainen was coming up as a free agent, and you saw the Carolina Hurricanes cap situation, it just made so much sense for so many reasons to sign Teuvo Teravainen. And for me, one of the top reasons was how well his game and Connor Bedard's game complement each other. And I think when Teravainen was signed here, that was part of the thought was, okay, you look at the skill set here, you look at the skill set Bedard has, these two complement each other very well. Maybe it won't be opening night. I'm hoping it is. I'm hoping that's what they start with. And I think Bertuzzi, as we talked about with your line combinations, fellas, again, a very complimentary player to those two, because while Teuvo certainly isn't a shrinking violet, to use a grandpa term, he's more of a finesse skill kind of a guy, right? Great two-way player, can defend, but he's not going to go crush you in a corner and steal the puck. Let Bertuzzi do that, get the puck to Teravainen, who's going to put it right on the tape for Bedard. And it's just a really well-designed line. Makes a ton of sense. So that's where I'm going with my top line.
I think part of the challenge of creating these lines and projecting opening night was like it kind of you almost have to project how you think training camp and the preseason is going to shake out, because I could see the lines that I have. I could see that being day one of training camp. But then as training camp and preseason games progress, it's like, oh, Bedard and Kurashev maybe aren't finding a rhythm right now. And Bedard gets put with Teuvo and Bertuzzi, and that line is finding a rhythm in the preseason. So you're like, hey, let's just roll into the regular season with it because it's been hot in the preseason. So just an observation, like as I was putting this together, I'm like, I could see these lines being like this for day one or for day one of camp. And then opening night rolls around and it's like, oh, there were a lot of different storylines that developed within training camp that kind of made the team pivot. So I have no problem with the way, with which direction you went.
How nice is it too that it's just so much of an improvement up in that top line, like as we're talking right now compared to last year. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected Philip Kurashev to take the step forward that he did last season. And now we're talking about him as possibly being on the top line once again with Bedard. But like you said, Jay, I mean, he and Bedard and Teravainen just seem to fit so well. And the makeup of all three of those personalities would make a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank. I went on Daily Faceoff and saw where the projected lines were, and I would just, kind of tinker what you could change, what you couldn't change. But again, I think out of the gate, and especially being on the road, I think maybe Luke Richardson might lean more towards Kurashev on that top line. But Charlie's absolutely right. The training camp results will probably play a factor. But keep in mind, remember who had a great training camp last year? It didn't translate to the beginning of the regular season was Lucas Reichel. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go to you actually both had the same second line too.
Charlie's a cheater, by the way.
Wait, did I send mine in first? Because Joe, you didn't put yours in the group chat.
I sent it to Jay separately. I thought this was going to be like a surprise type thing, but
well, let's be honest. Like, there's only so many logical conclusions to be drawn with the line combos. So I don't feel bad. But Joe, we'll let you do the reveal for this one.
Okay. Thank you, Jay, as I will release my very unique and personal second line for the Hawks with Taylor Hall, a healthy Taylor Hall, a healthy Andreas Athanasiou, and Teuvo Teravainen moving to that second line. I don't know how much this will play a factor, but I like the fact that Athanasiou and Teravainen are both the same age. And I feel like the success of this line is going to rely mainly on how much potential the Hawks can get tapped out of Andreas Athanasiou. It's been such an up and down career with him since joining the Hawks, but I feel like that line can make a lot of sense. Again, it relies on Taylor Hall being healthy, Athanasiou being healthy, but Teravainen also just seems like a guy that might be able to utilize Andreas Athanasiou in the best way possible. You have some more muscle like Hall doing some of the dirty things like Tyler Bertuzzi on that top line. So maybe that can be the magic potion to finally get Andreas Athanasiou at his top potential, because once they finally get that, I mean, he is such a huge asset. I know the Hawks talk about it a ton, but I mean, the speed that he brings can be so pivotal, so useful if they can just figure out the right way to totally utilize it.
Yeah, I originally had Dickinson as the second line center on this line, but I moved him down to the third because I thought it was noteworthy that Athanasiou finished the season last year on the second line and Dickinson was on the third. It makes me feel like the Hawks feel that Jason Dickinson is so much better in a checking role. It's like, we don't want to move him a slot up and then the third line or then the fourth line guy is playing on the third line. I think they really want to try to find that second line center. And that's why, Joe, I agree with you. I have Athanasiou. I think he'll get the first crack at second line center. And he had dealt with a groin injury basically all of last season. I think with a full offseason to fully heal that groin and Andreas getting psychologically right too, to trust that the groin is okay, I feel like we could see a different type of player, just a little bit. And then Teuvo on the right side, I think that's self-explanatory. Taylor Hall is an interesting one because he hasn't played in forever. And I feel like I wouldn't be opposed to starting him on the third line to let him work the minutes back. But it feels like to put him in the best position to succeed, I would like to pair him with some speed type players and playmakers to get him going and his confidence back up. So that's why I kept him on the second.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's take a little bit of a sidebar here, and just to spoil what's coming, none of us have Frank Nazar on the opening night roster. And this is something that we've talked about a lot on this show, is it feels like that second line center spot was left available for a reason, right? It's almost as if the Hawks are saying, hey, if Nazar can win this job, it is his to have. However, you do have some protection with Athanasiou and with Dickinson, who can play on the second line in a pinch. Kurashev has even played some center too. So you do have some options there, but none of us had Nazar in the lineup. I'll let you two kind of go first with your reasoning as to why.
Yeah, for me, it's his freshman year at Michigan. It was only like half of a season because of the injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the injury that he had, like, it takes like a full 18 months for a player to really find their rhythm again. And I remember talking to Nazar, I think it was maybe after his first game. You know, when did you feel like yourself again? And he was like, it wasn't until the World Juniors, which is in December. Like, that was like not long ago. So for him, I don't know if I like the idea of him starting in the NHL right away, even if he turns in a really strong camp, because I kind of want him to mentally and physically prepare for a grueling 82-game season plus playoffs. So why not just let him start the year in Rockford? He's going to be a go-to guy right away down there. And I think it's better to do it that way than, hey, let's throw him into the NHL, even if he has a strong camp, then wait for him to fizzle to send him to Rockford. Because then then it feels like the demotion is a story. Whereas if he just starts the year in Rockford, just let him go play, because I don't think anyone would make a deal out of it if he was the go-to guy in Rockford.
Well, once again, Charlie stole all my answers. But to echo on coming back from the injury, I remember somebody in the Hawks front office saying how, you know, as hardworking as Nazar is as a player and just a human being, that kind of hindered his rehab, because once he got back on the ice, he was just expecting to do everything that he possibly could, like he used to when he was at his full potential health-wise, and that's just not the case. So he had to go a little bit slower, and that took some coaxing to do. So I do think that not so much sets him back heading into this year, but just the timeline probably doesn't work out as seamlessly if he didn't have that injury. And like Charlie said, I expect him to spend the majority of the year down in Rockford. So it makes more sense to me to start him down there for that year. You know, he already got his NHL call-up. He had quite the moment at the United Center, scoring a goal on his first shot at the UC with his whole family in attendance. It's hard to recreate that. So I don't think it's too much of a failure if he doesn't make the opening day roster. And I think it's quite a challenge for him to do so, one that he'll be ready to do and ready to achieve, but it's not a failure if he doesn't get there. And again, because we're talking about opening day, I mean, if someone gets injured and he had that great of a camp, maybe you do see him pop up. But as of right now, opening day, I wouldn't expect to see him. And I don't know if I'd want to see him right away on that opening day roster, but obviously all the upside in the world for Nazar.
Yeah, good points. And Charlie, I think your point too of like, if he starts here and then, as every young player does, they hit that wall, 15, 20 games in, the excitement and the adrenaline of the beginning of the season, kind of wears off. Teams start to become a little bit more aware of you, and all those factors can make things kind of start to fall apart. And then, then he's sent down, then that becomes a story. If there's one thing that we know and like about Kyle Davidson, is that he will be patient with prospects. He will take his time. He's not going to rush anybody up here. There's no need for Frank Nazar to start the season here. And Joe, I think to your point too, if he comes out and is absolutely unbelievable in training camp and somebody gets banged up and there's an opportunity, I think they're not afraid to have him here. But in an ideal world, everybody's healthy. I think he starts the season in Rockford and, like you said, plays the majority. Then as you get to the trade deadline and maybe some of these veterans get shipped off and some roster spots open up, and he's already had what we would all probably predict to be a pretty successful rookie season in Rockford, then maybe you call him up and start his NHL career. And I think just like if you look at Wyatt Kaiser last year, I know it's defenseman versus forward, but really good training camp, really good preseason, really good first 3 or 4 games. And then it just all came crashing down and things got out of control for him and he had to get sent down, goes down in Rockford, finds his game again, then comes back at the end of the year and is one of the Hawks' better defensemen. So that's, like, we talked about it yesterday when we did our top 10 defensemen in the league right now. We've been talking about it for a long time. Like, let these guys develop. It takes time. It takes 2-3 years for guys to hit their full potential, and the Hawks aren't trying to win the Stanley Cup this year. There's no need to rush anybody. All right, we've got to hit a break here real quick. We'll come back with my second line and Charlie and Joe's third line, and we got to get our asses moving. We're talking too much. So right back in a second on CHGO Blackhawks, but at Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, and save on the perfect new vehicle for you. This August, score newer, lower prices across their huge inventory during the Make This the Summer event. For a limited time, get 0% financing for 36 months on most of their new 2024 Jeep models, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. Damn. Let the amazing team at Ray CDJR help you during each step of your car shopping journey. With Ray's Price Promise, the numbers you're hearing now are the exact same prices you can expect to shop in-store and online. That's because Ray's Price Promise means no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees. Since they prioritize affordability for their customers, hurry in to Ray CDJR today and shop one of Chicago's largest inventories, then drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out the team at Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, because they are the only team we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more info, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com, serving the community since 1963. Okay, I will now reveal my second line, which is way different from your guys's, which is fine. I've got Dickinson centering Taylor Hall and Ilya Mikheyev. And I don't know a ton about Mikheyev. I'm going to be honest. I know this is a guy that had some solid years, then went something like 175 consecutive games without a goal last year, something crazy. They gave up very little to get him, and I think a change of scenery could do him well, and I think they're a little bit excited to maybe give him this opportunity to play in a higher role to start the season and give him an opportunity to regain that scoring touch that he had earlier in his career. And like I said, it's opening day. Things are obviously going to change, but I have him with Dickinson and Hall. And something I want to go back to, you guys both alluded to it with Taylor Hall, is his ability to go in and play physical and get the puck. I think that's part of his game that's a little bit underrated. He doesn't get a lot of credit for that. I think a lot of people think of Taylor Hall as this all skill, no defense kind of a player. And that's not really the case. I'd stop short of calling him a power forward, but he certainly has the willingness to go earn pucks. And in his limited time in Chicago, we saw him active behind the net a lot, in the corners a lot, doing a lot of the work that's necessary to get the puck to your teammates and to keep it for yourself. So I could see him there. How do you guys feel about Mikheyev coming in here? I know it's a bit of an unknown for us in terms of seeing him play every day, but I'm kind of excited to see what he's going to bring.
Yeah, so for me, there was a clip a few years ago, I think it was during the COVID season, where Mikheyev literally hunted down Connor McDavid on a foot race. And so he's got a speed element to his game. The problem is it was the 2022-23 season. At the beginning, he tore his ACL and really hasn't quite gotten back to that yet. Having said that, it always feels like the second year is the year where they start feeling like themselves again. So this might be a situation where Mikheyev starts to find his groove. Last year didn't go as well for him. To be honest with you, how long he went without a goal is pretty unsustainable in the NHL. So it feels like his luck is going to turn a little bit. And I also want to mention this. I don't know if you guys remember, but when Mikheyev was making his decision to come to North America, it came down to Toronto and Chicago. Chicago was his second team that he was going to go to. So it's kind of a unique situation where he's circling back on this team. I know he had a waive to come here, and it was a different regime that was recruiting him in a different situation because Kane and Taves and all those guys were still on the roster. But it's funny that he ended up landing in Chicago anyway. I could see him being used in so many different areas this season. It's really just a matter of, how does his leg feel? Can he start to find his form again that he was a couple years ago? And if he does, you can honestly probably plug him anywhere in the lineup.
I just kind of always go back to Kyle Davidson's hit rate on these types of moves. Yeah, I mean, it really worked with Sam Lafferty. It worked with Jason Dickinson. To some extent, it worked with Joey Anderson. So I just feel like, Jay, as you said, they're kind of taking a flyer on him. It's an opportunity to get a whole lot of upside for a very small risk. And again, just the scene change and where the Hawks are at this moment, I think could be a good fit for him because he doesn't have to be one of the main point producers, but he has an opportunity to really fill that role. But the Hawks don't have to rely on him because they can expect production from other players. So I think all of that into account can make a successful year for him.
All right, let's move on to our third lines. And guess what, fellas? You have the same line again.
Really? Wow.
Okay, wait. Can we just run through our third and fourth line? Because there's I can combine my thoughts because I know we're running a little tight.
No, you're good. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. So third line, I got Foligno, Dickinson, and Mikheyev. No shock there. I think Foligno, Dickinson were awesome together. I think Joey Anderson on that right side, you selfishly hope that he can get back there but looking at the roster, I don't know how he fits on this roster. And then should I go to my fourth line really quick?
Go for it.
Let's go to the fourth line. So I have Reichel, Donato, and Maroon. And I know this is going to kind of surprise a lot of people because I am not a fan of Reichel on the fourth line. I actually, after day one of free agency, I had Reichel on the third line and Foligno on the fourth line. But I was like, this kind of doesn't make sense because it feels like Foligno played well enough last year where he still has a spot on the third line with Dickinson. Here's where I'm coming from with Reichel. I believe, and someone can double check me on this, but I believe Reichel is no longer waiver exempt because he hit 11 games in his first year. That reduced his waiver exemption from 4 years to 3 years. So if he does not make the opening night roster, I don't believe the Hawks can send him to Rockford without him going through waivers. I could be wrong on that. But just doing my research, I thought I read that correctly. So having said that, do you see a spot where Reichel is taking over a top 6 role, top 9 role? I don't know. And Jay, you had mentioned the second line role, leaving that one open. Man, the Blackhawks would love for Reichel to solidify that spot, but he just hasn't shown it. So for me, I think Reichel, I'm putting him on the fourth line to start and kind of piggyback off of where he finished last season, where he's got to earn his way up the lineup. Because in my eyes, if he's a healthy scratch to start the season, that's like a big red flag. So I'd rather he start in the lineup, even if it's on the fourth line, and let him earn his way up.
Yeah, that's a massive red flag. And I think we have a little bit of encouragement because he finished decently strong last year. And then we saw the finish he had 2 seasons ago. We're like, oh, damn, he's here. Okay, check that box. Like Lucas Reichel made it. Then he was just absolute ass for the majority of the season last year. I think he would admit that as well. But it is hard. Like as you shake this thing out, I had kind of the same struggle as like, where's Reichel going? Because he kind of has to make the team. Would he get through waivers? Maybe. I don't know. Because I know GMs kind of have this like, hey, can you please not? Like, like they can have that kind of an agreement here and there. Like, hey, we'd appreciate if you please don't claim this guy. But that he would be appealing to a lot of teams that think, hey, reclamation project, top 6 guy, potentially has had success at the NHL level. I don't know. I think he has to be feeling like this is his real last chance to prove himself here.
So I don't mean to fast forward to my fourth line.
Go for it.
I didn't have Reichel on there though, but I didn't see it so much as the demise of Lucas Reichel for this year. I stuck with, like you said, the same line on Foligno, Dickinson, and Mikheyev as Charlie and Daily Faceoff as well. Again, I like Foligno and Dickinson's hard work mentality, the Mikheyev slot for all the possible outcomes or possible upside that he can provide that we mentioned earlier. But that last line, again, I don't see it being a ginormous red flag if Reichel is a healthy scratch, because I could also see it possibly being a teaching moment or a learning moment, or just kind of not so much a reality check, but just a subtle reminder to Reichel that he does have to prove a lot. And I'm still a big Lucas Reichel fan. I think he could finally come out of his shell this year. It's going to take another training camp like he had last year, but maybe even better. I mean, if he has a slightly less impressive training camp this year than he did last year, I think that would constitute a healthy scratch, but not moving him to a different team. And I put Landon Slaggert in there because he's a guy that I think can get some playing time at the NHL level this year. I think the Hawks are going to give him the chance to, but he has to do everything that he needs to do and bring that whole hardworking mentality. He's earned it, right? He's spent all that time at Notre Dame. He's learned leadership capabilities and responsibilities, and I feel like he can provide that. So maybe that's a nod to a successful training camp for him, and maybe even just kind of putting Reichel a little bit through the ringer. Like, even if he does have a slightly better training camp than Landon Slaggert, I could see the front office maybe being like, you know what, we're going to give Slaggert a chance because his chances might be a little bit less than Reichel in this moment. And I only didn't have Maroon on there because they're playing Utah opening night. I figure maybe you don't need as big of a bruiser as him. But, I'm not going to die on that hill or anything.
No, I think a lot of this is, that's why we're doing it. It's all very flexible. All right, I'll do my third and fourth lines. And I think when I reveal my third line here, it's going to make the rest of mine make a lot of sense. And Lucas Reichel is the reason why. My third line is Athanasiou centering Reichel and Kurashev for the main reason that is the best that two of those three have looked in Chicago, right? Athanasiou and Reichel and Kurashev together. That's when 89 and 27, now 73, looked their best as Blackhawks, right? That line had absolute chemistry. It was working out very, very well. Lucas Reichel played great. That's why that's my third line. I think this team is looking at not only, yes, we need to send a message to Lucas Reichel that he needs to be better. They're also saying we need to find a way to make Lucas Reichel work again because he's important to this. Like, if you suddenly have a draft pick from a first round pick from a few years ago that's no longer in your plans, that's not great. And look, you look at a guy like Reichel, and we've been talking about this, like, that's a top 6 kind of a guy. You're not going to say like, well, we're going to turn you into Dan Carcillo. That's not coming from Lucas Reichel. You know what I mean? Like, he's never going to be a Carcillo or Nick Foligno or Andrew Shaw or any kind of a bottom 6 guy with like a little bit of a scoring touch. He can't be that guy. He has to be a skill top 6 kind of a guy. And they need to find a way to unlock that and get that confidence going for him. So I think that's why that's the third line. They want Athanasiou to start strong, especially want Reichel to start strong. So that's my third line. And my fourth line is Ryan Donato centering Nick Foligno and Pat Maroon. I think you bring these veterans in, and like Maroon, we'll get to the defenseman too. I feel like you kind of got to play them early, right? Like, and then let them like, okay, it's been 5 games. We're going to rest you because you're old. Here comes Landon Slaggert. And I think Slaggert is a guy who I believe he's NHL ready, but also put him in Rockford, let him lead that team, right? Like, no doubt about it, be the vocal leader, maybe put a letter on his jersey, all those sort of things, and then really get him ready to be a full-time NHL player. I think Landon Slaggert's a full-time NHL player. I think he's a full-time NHL player before 82 games this season. I think, again, once a trade deadline happens and maybe they move Maroon or maybe they move Craig Smith, who I have as one of my extras, then Landon Slaggert's here, and then he is a Blackhawk to stay. But because they brought in all these veterans, I feel like it is a sign that they want to give all these young Hawks some time in Rockford. And then if Kyle Davidson basically said this too, like, and then if they force our hand, then we'll make a space for them. But you don't want to have them prove they're not ready and then scramble to find somebody. They're doing it. And that's kind of what happened last year. Is you had guys that maybe weren't ready and guys that got hurt, and you had nothing to replace them. So you got to go find Rem Pitlick and Zach Sanford and Anthony Beauvillier, and you got to do all these things. And then they're playing catch up all year, and you're never really able to get your full thing going. Now they're designed to take a little bit of a hit. And if Reichel or Slaggert or Nazar or whoever is undeniably ready, then you figure it out, move them in. Maybe you scratch a veteran, maybe you move a veteran. Figure it out from there. I just think they're way more equipped to handle that now. So that's where I'm at on my fourth line. All right, let's start with our defensive pairs. I don't know if we got a ton of disagreement on the top pair. I think we all agree it's Vlasic and Jones.
Yep.
Yeah, we're all lockstep on that one.
You're here.
Yeah. So we don't need to talk about it. We know. That's a good combo. Happy with it. I'm going to go first with my second pair. I'm the only guy with Kevin Korchinski making the team, which I found interesting. I've got Korchinski and Murphy together. And I think, we've talked about this often, but the fact that he couldn't play in Rockford last year, and now he can, that might be appealing to the Hawks. And I get that. I understand that. I literally was just talking about taking your time, let these guys develop, all those things. I don't think Korchinski struggled enough to lose his NHL job last season. I think that he was kind of just keeping his head above water, doing his thing. But while at no point was he looking dominant, at no point was he looking like, oh boy, this guy's in trouble.
I mean, I would push back a little bit on that because the Hawks dedicated an entire practice in March last year to box out drills because Korchinski got manhandled the day before.
Fair.
And so I don't think so I just full disclosure, I left off Korchinski on my opening night roster, and it wasn't because I don't think he looked so in over his head last year. I just think he didn't do enough to show that he's ready to thrive at the NHL level. So let him go work through that in Rockford now that he is eligible to go to the AHL. And oh, by the way, Artem Levchinov is going to be down there in Rockford too. So if you get Korchinski and Levchinov in Rockford to kind of start building some rapport, because they might be a pairing long-term in Chicago, let them go figure that out together. If Korchinski showed enough last season where he's like, man, he's too good to be in Rockford, then I would totally get it. But it feels like there's still a lot of room for him to grow. And also I think the Blackhawks bringing in TJ Brody last second, I think indicated that they were ready, that they want Korchinski to start in Rockford, because last year when Wyatt Kaiser came up in the second half, he looked like a totally different player. There were so many nights where I was watching Kaiser and I'm like, I didn't even notice him. And that's a good thing because it was like he was so steady back there. And so for me, I think Kaiser and Murphy are going to be a pairing, and then Martinez and Brody is kind of the second and third pairing is kind of interchangeable for me. It doesn't really matter. So I think Kaiser is the guy that's going to be with Murphy, and I think Isaac Phillips is the extra on that road trip because Isaac Phillips he's shown everything he can in Rockford. I think now it's time for him to take the next step at the NHL level. So those are my thoughts on Korchinski. Joe, I don't know. It sounds like you left him off too. Were your reasons similar?
Yeah, pretty much the same. And I think, again, it's kind of like with Nazar, the fact that they're expecting him to spend the majority of the season in Rockford. So let's start the year down there. I think I'm not discouraged by Kevin Korchinski's first year in the NHL, but it's not like I was overly impressed either. But you can't be with a 19-year-old like that. And kind of like playing a totally different game with how much smaller he is. I mean, he just needs to grow so much. I think he will, and I think he can be a mainstay at the Blackhawks defensive pairs. But I think that's where the trade-off is. And again, to just kind of reward Wyatt Kaiser for, like Charlie, you mentioned, a good second stint in the NHL last year. He made the opening day roster last season. He also earned the captaincy at the Tom Curver's Prospect Showcase. So maybe this is just another nod for a guy that they know can lead by example. He's kind of, I mean, listen, he's not one of the veterans, but he's not completely a rookie either. He's one of these younger guys that can help lead all the other younger guys. And I think it'd be a good example if he were to make the opening day roster and be paired with Connor Murphy, who he can learn a lot from, and just kind of continue to accelerate all the progression that he had in his second stint with the NHL last year.
Charlie, really great point. You too, Joe. But the Levchinov thing is something that I'd somehow not considered, is just having Korchinski and him just play together as much as they can in Rockford and then coming together as an NHL pair when it's time. Korchinski, left defenseman, Levchinov, the elusive right-hand defenseman, and that they could be a pair. You're looking, I mean, because you're going to have Vlasic and Jones here for a few more years, that's for sure. So if you can start getting that second pair of Levchinov and Korchinski, and maybe potentially eventually your first pair of Korchinski and Levchinov ready together, that makes a lot of sense. I'm fine with it either way. I'm interested to see how Korchinski comes into camp this year, because I think all of us, when we saw Sam Renzel show up at development camp, were like, dude, that's a different guy. Like, he had grown so much physically.
He started looking like a man, right?
Yeah. Like, and you wonder what kind of weight and muscle that Korchinski's added in the offseason. Again, that's a guy who doesn't want to add too much because his game is speed and finesse and all those things. But interested to see how he looks coming into camp this year. I don't think the door is closed on him making it, but I also think got a lot of people who sort of think that he's going to spend a lot of the year in Rockford. I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't know. We'll see. But the point, too, of bringing in TJ Brody last minute is kind of like, yeah, that means something. And it's a 2-year deal. So that they're counting on him to be here for a while. If it was a 1-year deal and it's another guy we assume has flipped at the deadline, maybe you're not so, it doesn't raise your eyebrows as much. But the fact that it's a 2-year deal means that I think that TJ Brody's going to play.
But Jay, if Korchinski does spend the majority of the year in Rockford, do you think that that's, I don't want to say a failure, but do you think that's not a good sign?
No. I mean, unless he goes to Rockford and struggles.
Yeah.
Right. Like if he's in Rockford and we're getting reports that he's not playing well and the points aren't coming and those sort of things, then that might alarm me. But the fact that he's in Rockford does not, I mean, he's 20 years old. Like it's
right.
It makes perfect sense. And he would have been last year if he could have been. I think it made perfect sense to not have him go back to Seattle and just put up 150 points against children. Like, what does that teach him? If anything, it teaches him kind of bad habits, right? Because he's so much better. And I think with Levshinov at Michigan State, if you go back and watch some of his tape and some of the critiques of his game, it's like, look at this guy. He's just freewheeling and kind of going wherever he wants. It's because he was that much better than everybody. And he knew, like, well, if I make a mistake, I can just get back. You learn bad habits that way. So that's why I'm glad he's going pro, and I think Korchinski kind of the same way. So that's my second pair is Korchinski and Murphy. My third pair is Martinez and Brody. Like I said earlier, you bring in these veterans, they're going to play. And I also had Isaac Phillips as my extra because I know they don't have a ton invested in him in the future. And if he sits a few games here or there, I don't think they worry about it. Whereas if it was Kaiser or Del Mastro or Nolan Allen or whoever it might be, they want those guys playing games. Be it Rockford or Chicago, they don't want them being scratched. That doesn't do anyone any good. With Isaac Phillips, I don't think they have that concern.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. And Joe, did you give your third pair yet? I'm sorry.
It was just Martinez and Brody. I mean, just for everything that you guys have already mentioned. I don't have an enlightening thing to add to that.
Well, Greg brought this up yesterday. I thought it was interesting that Martinez kind of alluded to the fact that, hey, if you notice, I played for Vegas and maybe wasn't quite as banged up as they made it seem like I was to manipulate things as the Vegas Golden Knights like to do. He is still, 37? Is he 37 already? Or is he only 36?
Sounds right.
Might be 36, I thought.
Let me see. Alec Martinez.
No, he's 30.
Yeah, he's 37. So, I mean, there's only so much left for him to do. But I'm excited to see what he brings, like a veteran leader. And I think the way that I think a lot of people last year when the Hall and Foligno trade was made, Foligno kind of was like a bit of an afterthought until the season began. And people are like, whoa, this guy is really making an impact here. And he's a better player than we gave him credit for. And off the ice, he's really doing a ton. I think we could probably see a similar contribution from Alec Martinez.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, when the Hawks, when Seth Jones got injured last year, the Hawks didn't have anyone that could help shoulder some of those minutes. So if the Hawks suffer some sort of significant sideline or absence on defense, they can lean on Martinez, Brody, Murphy, they can all kind of slide up the lineup and tackle those minutes together. Whereas last year, it feels like they could not absorb the loss of Seth Jones. And so this just provides some stability more on the back end. They're not sexy options, but it's just, I don't think the Hawks need them to be. I think they just need to be okay.
They need to be not Jacob Megna.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the thing too. I mean, I don't mean to be the eternal optimist here, but it just seems like heading into this season, they're built so much more fundamentally to where they're not going to have to rely on these guys that you have to pull from off of waivers, and they can challenge their young players. They can rely on the young players a lot more efficiently this way. It's not like it's all or nothing with the rookies. And, we got to put Kevin Korchinski out there every night because this is the only place he can be. So and I don't know specifically. I've never been a professional hockey player, but the fact that
Not yet.
I know, right? Surprising. I've got a terrible slap shot. That's the only thing. The fact that all these young guys had all these responsibilities, had the NHL experience, and now they got to kind of get reminded that they need to get it back. I think that can play a factor positively in their development, because the AHL is not just a step down. I mean, it's a rough and tumble league. So you got to work through that. You got to learn good tendencies and good traits down there, and with guys that you're expecting to be playing with for a long amount of time. So it's just heading into this year just seems, again, so much more like fundamentally structured.
Yeah, and it's something that's come up with the forwards and defensemen. I think it's worth noting. As much as I feel like the Hawks fan base is very positive towards Kyle Davidson, I think they've been impressed with what he's done so far. Obviously, getting Connor Bedard helps, but the ability to, despite the fact that the Hawks are a lower tier team, they were able to bring in two pretty big free agents in Bertuzzi and Teravainen, right? That certainly had suitors elsewhere. Drafting looks pretty good so far as you see the trajectory of a lot of these guys. But the fact that he looked at last season and the way he went into last season and said, okay, I screwed that up. I did not have this team deep enough, strong enough to withstand any sort of injuries. And look, yes, last year's injury situation was historic. It was awful, but they were not prepared to handle it. Even if you were to take 2 or 3 of those away, they were, like I said earlier, Pitlick, Sanford, Beauvillier, Megna, you're playing Jared Tenorti every night. They were not prepared to withstand what happened to them last year. And I think that's one of the lessons that he learned here was, okay, I've got to be a little more ready to go here. And when you look at Brody and Martinez and Smith and Maroon, whose roles will probably be bigger to start the season and then go down later. I'm talking more specifically about Maroon and Smith, I think, than the defensemen. It's just, you've got NHL talent. And then if somebody goes down, you can call up Landon Slaggert or you can call up Frank Nazar or whoever it might be and know that you've got NHL talent to call up, as opposed to like, well, we barely have NHL talent in the NHL. Now what do we do? So I think they're way more well prepared to handle it. And I'd like to see the GM of this team learn from mistakes and say, okay, lesson learned. I got to be more prepared depth-wise. And he did it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the reason why I didn't include Slaggert on my opening night roster, because it does feel like he's one of the most NHL-ready forward prospects in Rockford. But you don't want him to start the year in Rockford, then you have to waive Craig Smith or a veteran, and then you deal with another injury, and you're like, oh, wait, we actually want Craig Smith back because we actually need to fill that hole. So it's like, just let Landon develop in Rockford, let the veterans fill out the NHL roster, and once you get maybe an injury or two, then you can call up those guys knowing that they can step in right away and not feel like they're in over their heads.
Going back to Jay's point about the reception of Kyle Davidson, I would agree with fans who are pleased with everything that's happened so far. Someone has brought up, though, like this is kind of the easy part, right? I mean, you can get rid of players, you can bring in all the talent, all the young talent, all the prospects. Everyone is a great draft pick at the moment. And Kyle Davidson will tell you this too. He's been very upfront about all that. Like they have to still hit on a lot of these guys. That all still has to happen. I do wonder, though, like how different are these rosters looking like this year and last year if they didn't win Connor Bedard? Like, because you think about an accelerated attempt to have a more competitive year this upcoming year. I mean, are they doing that if they don't have Bedard? I know it's a road no one really wants to go down, but I just think that is such a big factor among this whole rebuild that just provides even more value for having Connor Bedard on your team.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does not feel the same today as it would not to take anything away from Fantilli or Carlson, but they're not Connor Bedard. And that like light at the end of the tunnel would feel way farther away if it was one of those two. And again, I think both those guys are going to be really good players, but we did our, believe it or not, we did our Connor Bedard prediction episode already, like 2 months ago. And we're all like 90 points ish, kind of like teetering in that area, like at least point per game. And then from there, I think the expectation is he's going to be a perennial 100-point plus player if healthy. And I don't think either of those guys project anything close to that. So, yeah, without Bedard, well, I mean, it's way different. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. But like, really, you do the butterfly effect is scary. Like, you just think, well, if not him, then, you draft probably Fantilli or Carlson. And then this year, what changes? Like, do you not go left now? Do you try to get Demidov now because you need that dynamic scorer? Like, it just gets, there's so many things.
I'd probably go with Bennett Seneca.
That's still a great moment where he's like, what?
Amazing.
Me?
That was a great moment in the Sphere too, because he was on the Sphere screen and he literally just mouthed it and everyone got a good chuckle out of it.
Yeah, that was good. Well, fellas, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Wow, what about the goalies? I'm kidding.
Like Mrazek and Brossois. And Mrazek will start.
Brossois.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My prediction is 48 starts to 34. I feel like is going to be the split.
Okay. I like
That's what
that.
I would say.
Joe?
I didn't have that down, but I'll just copy Charlie again. Yeah,
Wow.
We'll go with that.
Fair enough.
If healthy.
I think I did this already, so I don't want to contradict what I said, but I know I did say I believe at some point this season Brossois will leapfrog Mrazek.
I mean, they gave him a what is it, a 3.3 AAV? That's not backup money. That's 1B money.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be closer to 50-50. So,
well, at least we know there will not be, knock on wood, an automatic loss every third or fourth game, because that's how it felt last year. And we didn't talk about Soderblom, but good for him that he gets to go to Rockford and figure things out. Because I think he's probably, I know he's better than he was last year. We've seen it. So hopefully he can figure things out too.
Goalies are weird too. They develop late. Like, he's still 24. He could easily find his groove when he's like 27. Like he's still got a long career ahead of him. If it's not, I wouldn't write him off yet either. No matter whether it's in Chicago or somewhere else.
Exactly. All right, fellas. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it very much. Charlie Roumeliotis, Joe Brand. Love you guys. Thanks for doing this. And I'm back Monday, as of now, by myself. So it's Ask Jay Anything /mailbag. Shoot us a tweet at CHGO_Blackhawks. I'll put that tweet up probably Saturday morning or Sunday morning. So look for that and respond to it, or hit us up in our CHGO Diehards Only Discord. And I can grab your questions from there. Discord, diehards always get priority. You'll get your questions answered first. So if you're a diehard, do it in the Discord. It's the easiest way to do it. Thanks to Joey for producing the show. And until Monday, this has been the CHGO Blackhawks podcast.